Hello, you're listening to Thursday Lunch, the show about the mechanisms and magic for creating great brands. I'm Stephanie Robbins.
And I'm Dan Howell. And today we're going to talk about feedback, giving it, receiving it, and understanding it. And we'll just start with what I believe is my definition of feedback, um, and that feedback is a type of communication within the constraint of affecting change. It's it's feedback is anything that you are when you are communicating and you're trying to get people to change. Yeah.
I
So
love
that could
that.
be corrective, that could be directional, like, hey, because as an R&D guy, as a developer, I get feedback all the time. Like I show stuff to people and I listen to 30 people's opinions, right? And why do I do that? Because I want to understand what I should change,
Yeah.
right? So yeah. Feedback is a type of communication within the constraint of affecting change.
I love
So,
that definition. I think a lot of times we only think of feedback either negatively
yeah.
or, um, just personally. And
Hmm.
I love the example of being a developer and needing to get that input. As a marketer, you do the same thing. You send out surveys. You
Right.
get input from consumers or customers. And I think that most, not all jobs, obviously food safety quality should not be getting, well, they could get feedback on how effective their programs are, but
Hmm.
they're more exact. I don't want my accountant getting feedback on, if everybody's happy with their paycheck, but if everybody's happy with their payroll process, that could be different. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it really I know from directional, if we speak of directional feedback, like, you know, it it took a lot of time to, in different organizations to understand like, hey, how do you do directional feedback here? How do we come to that understanding? Because, it could be like, hey, four or five people stand around, try things and go, hey, it's pretty good, right? And that's fine. And then there's other ones where it's like, oh, you know what? Everybody runs it, you put it in front of, however many people, and they, fill out a little questionnaire, and you get data. And if that's what you're doing, that's great too. But like again, what questions you ask, because on that feedback, and we've talked about this, like I hate asking how much somebody likes something because I don't think that it is useful feedback.
it's it's not directional.
It's not directional, but it also is asking the wrong question
It's right.
because
Right.
it's not about for product development, it's about meeting expectation, right? And so whenever I do a survey, I don't ask people whether they liked it. I
Right.
ask whether it met their expectation
Right.
of the product, of what was presented. Were they disappointed or were they happy about like, oh yeah, that met my expectation. Right.
Yeah.
So how I asked that question changed what kind of results you get because oftentimes you'd get these results. And, consumers loved it, but that doesn't mean they wanted it or that
Right.
they'd buy it. It just means that, they were in the good mood that day,
Yeah. Right.
perhaps. But if
Right.
you ask them, does this meet your expectation of a good cheeseburger? Well, that's different, right? It's a different question.
And that's a great segue into the idea of giving feedback.
Yes.
We've had an episode on receiving
Hmm.
feedback and when to listen and when to not and how to weigh in on that. But the idea of of understanding how to give feedback and these different types of feedback. So if I'm going to a cutting, and for anyone who's not in food, a cutting is when a chef or a developer shows their
Yeah.
food that they're making, and you're gonna cut it or you're gonna taste it, and
Hmm.
often taste it against other comparable things.
Right.
That's called a cutting. And so going to a cutting and being able to give feedback that can be useful.
Hmm.
So, hey, the flavor on this is really good. To your point, it meets my expectation on what this should taste like. The color is really not appetizing,
Right.
right? That's helpful.
Yeah.
And then it gives you opportunity for follow-up, right? How is it
Mhm.
not appetizing?
Right.
What color would you expect to see? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. What's the the texture and and like you hear the wine people talk about wine, and it's like if you don't drink a lot of wine, all those words are meaningless. But
right,
if you do, right, all those words have meaning.
right,
And the same is true of feedback on whatever it is. Make sure you're using the right language. So that because if somebody tells me on texture, oh, the texture is too short or too long or snotty or gummy or whatever, like those are all words that have meaning to me,
right,
and I have understanding where I can then affect change. I can go, oh, I agree with you. I can tweak what gum I put in. I can tweak, there's things I can do. Right? That's good feedback. I don't like it, not good feedback. It's like, well, why don't you like it? What do, like, you
right. Now
know,
we have to dig into where it
yeah.
didn't meet those expectations or where it didn't meet those, I love the texture question. I'm a texture eater. So where does it meet the textures that work for me
Hmm.
versus there
Yeah.
are certain cuisines, some cuisines have textures that don't work for me.
Yeah.
Um, Being able to give that. And I think that that idea of being really directional, very giving feedback in a way that offers the space to your point, affect change.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not feedback, it's just your opinion. It's or a praise or an attack. These
Right.
are, that's a praise is not feedback. Hey,
No.
you did great. That's great. I mean, yeah, it feels like it, but that's not. So I have a very artistic background. And in art and in art, especially in art classes and in artistic settings, you have a lot of criticism. You'll have a critique. You have
Hmm.
people come in and they might say, I really like this, but it's going to be, that's the praise. It's going to be, I really like this because you've captured this here, or this element does that there. And it's the same type of thing of what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
that makes me think of giving feedback as well. Like, so last episode we talked about managing versus leadership,
Right.
and that idea of being that leader, your bigger, better self, so that you can give directional feedback. So it isn't like, hey, Dan, you did a really good job, or hey, Dan, I'm not happy with the job. It's,
Right.
hey, Dan, you did a good job because you hit these marks, or I'm
Right.
not happy with the job because I really thought we were going to do this, this, and this. Or
Yeah.
can you help me understand how these things didn't happen? Right.
Hmm.
So that now we can work through, and again, this uses the 4 C's framework of
Right.
now we can work through how things did or didn't meet expectation. And now you have a way to affect change in yourself.
Right. And understand it. Yeah. And that is uh, uh, that corrective feedback, the essentially is like somebody, and that is, corrective feedback is I would say falls pretty solidly in the, you good management. You have to do corrective feedback,
Yeah.
right? Um,
But a
and
good leader manager,
yes,
like to me, this is where that leader versus manager comes in, right? Because they're
yeah. I mean,
creating the space for you to get to corrective actions, to get to a better
yeah,
to change.
yeah, absolutely. And uh, when I long ago when I worked at Starbucks. And when I worked there, when I started at Starbucks, there were 200 stores. So it was a while ago.
We're showing our age.
Uh, but they had great training on a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm, have benefited from many things I learned there. Uh, uh, and one of the things was about how to give corrective feedback, right? Um, and and I remember this from the class, and it was like one was like choose the thing you're going to have the corrective feedback on. Like you don't you don't have a laundry list. You have a thing,
Yes.
right?
That's really important too, because you have to give people space to at least, hear. People can only hear
Yeah.
so many things.
Right. And they can only take so many actions,
Yeah.
right? So you have your one thing, right? And then it's what, and why.
And what is that?
What is the thing,
Okay.
right? You know, hey, Stephanie, when you called me the other day and called me, Ralph, whatever, like I didn't like that, right? Yeah, that's the what. The next what is what you should have done. When you call me, please call me Dan or some other nickname other than Ralph, right? I'm okay with nicknames, just not Ralph, right? Um, and then the why. Why am I not okay with it? Well, I'm not okay with it because when I hear Ralph, it reminds me of, you know, my dog or
Sure.
throwing up or Lord knows what. Right? It made up example, but
Sure.
you got to have what the thing was. That's a short part,
Yeah.
right? And the long part is what they should do
Yeah.
because you want to create you telling people what not to do doesn't work. Telling people what they should do does.
Yeah.
Um,
And
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 then
there's a
and then why?
nuance. There's a
Yeah,
nuance in that middle what of not telling people, what did you say? Not telling people what
not
to
yeah, telling people what they should do versus
not.
and focusing on the positive outcome
Yes,
because
and it
you know,
gives them an opportunity to visualize what success looks like, to see
yes,
success,
yeah,
and puts it in their grasp, rather
yes,
than if you're telling them what not to do only,
right.
then they may not really understand what they need to do instead.
Right.
So just saying I don't like being called Ralph
Right.
isn't helpful, but saying, I prefer my name Dan, call
Right.
me Dan. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I can call you Dan. That's
Right.
within grasp.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess I said Ralph, but it's really like if I want to be truthful, it's like Daniel. Like very few people call me Daniel. People call me Dan. I'm not really a Danny.
You're
Like
not a Danny.
I'm a
You're not a
Dan.
Daniel.
Right. Daniel, like when I hear Daniel,
Yeah.
there's really two people who can effectively call me Daniel, and it's my wife and my mother, and it's when I'm probably not doing what I should be.
When you don't want
Um,
to be hearing your name.
right.
When the middle
And
name
that's
comes out too. Yeah.
yeah. But I also like give me nicknames, lots of people. I got a lot of people who call me all sorts of, Scout, whatever, like, and I'm okay with that, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but Daniel makes me feel like, I'm a kid who's been caught.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And oftentimes I am a kid who's been caught when people call me Daniel. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah, that's the what and the why. But that what, and why I think is good, and it's based on and only doing one thing, and also what and focusing on the what is. That's all based on constraints that there are studies about. Like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of studies where if you tell people don't run,
They will run.
they will run. Anytime you tell people not to do something,
Yes.
you increase the odds of that activity happening.
And that reminds me of I used to ride a motorcycle. When you're riding your motorcycle, where you look, your motorcycle will go.
Right.
And it just reminds me of that, where you want to look to the place you want to get to. So giving someone that positive view of where you should be. You
Yeah.
should be at Dan, not at Danny, or Daniel. You should be
Yeah.
at Dan. And like I said earlier, now it's within grasp.
Yeah. And
It's within reach. It's projectable.
yeah, early in our marriage, in Jennifer and my marriage, like very early, like first year, we lived in Pacific Grove, California. It was
Yes.
beautiful, um, and we were there, and there was this kid. There were these kids, and they're out and running around in the tide pools, and they were clearly they were there for a wedding or something, right? They were
Yeah.
not in like tide pooling clothing, right? And the parents were like, we're on the shore, the kids are out there on the rocks. And the mom yells out to the son, "Don't get wet," right? And the kid like says, and before he finished the word won't, he was hip deep in water.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that is something that sticks with Jen and I to this day, where we will go, "Don't get wet," right?
Yeah.
And it's like it is there's a truth about manifesting
I
things.
was just thinking that. It's you're
You know,
manifesting it. That's
yeah,
right.
if you tell people not to do something, you are creating the idea that they should that they of that thing, right?
Right.
But
Right.
if you tell people they should do something, you
That's right.
create that idea in their head, right?
Again, it's what do you want to manifest? And
Right.
that's
Wh-
the other,
what change are you trying to affect,
right. Right.
right?
I think
You know.
the other part of this is that receptivity of it. And
Mhm.
so creating I'm sure everybody has heard the like say, you want to say a good thing before you say a hard thing, and then you want to end with a good thing. And
Right.
I do like that pattern when it's done right. So letting people know, hey, it's been great working with you the last 6 months. Maybe the last review, maybe we're talking about professional review and the last review was 6 months ago. Hey, this last 6 months has been really fun and we've gotten a lot of good things accomplished. So that opens the receptivity. Don't come in and be like, hey, you've got great hair. Okay, now you suck about this, right? It's
Right.
something that needs to be a real, and it's something that needs to be that opens up receptivity so they know this isn't going to be a moment of attack. This is
Yep.
so, hey, this was great. And then I love that why. We've had a really great time working together the last 6 months. It's been really fun. One thing I do want to address with you is when you call me, in your case, when you call me Danny,
Hmm.
and you can go through that, right? And you can even use iMessages if that's appropriate. But when you call me Danny, that doesn't really work for me.
Right.
What really works for me is Dan. And
Yep.
if you've got a name that you want. Uh,
Yep.
and so there's your what, and then your what, and then I always go by Dan. That's just generally how I see myself, how I present
Right.
myself in the world, and the why. It makes me feel disrespected when you call me Danny. It's just not the name I go by. And
Hmm.
then you go back to something good and you're like, you know, and I look forward to the next 6 months. We're going to be great. Like, building that. I mean, that's very rudimentary, but hopefully, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Well, and again, the research, at least I don't know how good the research was, but the research that been quoted in trainings for years is like that 4 or 5 to 1 like
Yes.
positive directional feedback
Yes.
to corrective directional feedback
Yes.
uh, ratio is about the right level.
I'm
Um,
in
you know.
marketing, it's an 8 to 1. You get 8 times more repeat of somebody who is unhappy with you to one repeat of somebody who is happy with you. So we are wired to remember that negative.
Yes.
And so, you see that play out in other places. So I agree. I think, really enforcing, and I think part of it too is it reminds me a little. I mean, we don't talk about parenting on this show, but it reminds me a little of parenting, of the
Oh
the
yeah.
idea of like you really have to keep the what you need corrected not only do you, again, to your earlier point, keep the list short, one, two things max, the most important, but you also need to put it in a non-emotional communication. So you can't be coming in and unloading your frustration. So I might be really frustrated with you over something. Every night you lock the door at 8:10 and I wanted the door to the store locked at 8. I'm just going with the Starbucks example.
Yeah.
Whatever. Um, and it's frustrated me, right? Maybe you didn't clean the machine right and it's frustrated me. It's not okay to come in with that frustration either, because again, if you actually want people to hear and be receptive to the feedback, you want them to affect change, you have to build it's so much the four C's. You have to build that communication
Right.
moment. This is a moment. You might have overall trust, but in this moment, you've got to build a communication trust that allows for receptivity.
Yeah, and there's the constraints, like the constraints on it. We've talked about kind of like big constraints, like, hey, humans only like the whole our brains monotask. Like we hear one thing at
Exactly.
a time, we do one thing at a time, and maybe we switch between tasks very fluidly, but
But we
but
don't
no,
multitask.
we're monotaskers. That's
That's right.
just how our brains work. Like don't you know
That's right.
anybody who tells you differently, is probably not fully aware of most of science, or perhaps there are a few people,
Oh,
like a
very
small
small.
percentage of people who can do that, right?
Yeah. And it's probably not you. And I don't
Yeah,
mean you because I know it's not you because it's
yeah.
not me either, but right.
But so
Yes.
we got that constraint, but also like, you know, hey, if you're giving me feedback, like there are people, who are very subtle and they couch things in, you know, and it's like in nuance and so on, and it's like that that doesn't work well for me.
Right.
Like what works well for me is, very clear, don't do that.
Yeah.
Please do this, or please do this, right? Without
Yeah.
don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Direct, straightforward, like, which is why, in our last episode, I was talking about, had great leaders, like they were great leaders, so on, horrible people, like just, like, but it was great for me because they were super clear. They were just like, do this, do it
Yeah.
now, have
Yeah.
it done by then. And it's like, okay,
Okay.
great,
Now I know what success looks like.
right. You know,
When when my son,
other people are just like, but how, and it's like, I'm not bothered by that.
yeah.
I'm just happy to have a clear goal. Like,
Yes.
that's me, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I communicate sometimes with people. And it can work, but there are times with, there are people who I know who I've figured out, and it's like, oh, I can't, I can't communicate. I can't give this person that feedback that way because that's not who they are. That's not how they experience the world. That's not how they
Right.
understand things.
Right.
And subsequently, I need to go, hey, what do you think about this? And well, great, that's interesting. And what about, you gotta, because they they aren't they're emotionally different. And now can I
Right.
do I know how they're experiencing their world? No, I don't, but I can build a model where it's like, oh, I'm more effective if I use this sort of thing with this
Right.
person and this sort of thing with this person.
And
You
those
know,
are the constraints, right? Different
yeah,
people navigating the world differently. So
right.
thinking, just hearing how that direct communication, that direct feedback works well for you reminds me of my son when he was in school, in his K through 12 years in school, and his in fifth grade, he got this teacher that all the other
Mhm.
people around would say, "Oh, she's phoning it in. She's just getting ready for retirement. You're not going to like her. She's really mean." And my son walked in there, and this teacher, first of all, I can tell you right now, was not phoning it in. This teacher was not mean. She had high standards, and she was very particular and very strict and very, very clear in her communication as to what she expected. And my son thrived because for
Uh-huh.
him, he doesn't want you to be all nice. He wants you to tell him what you want from him so he can deliver, right?
Yes.
And so for him, they did, I mean, this was fifth grade, they did a research paper that was outstanding. And, he's performing at that level that she had set the bar because she was clear.
Yes.
Here's what we're doing. And
Yeah.
and I think that I love the what, and why, because I think that has that same type of clarity.
Yes.
And it reminds me of my story you and I were talking about earlier, where I had a boss that was giving me feedback. We had a project that had many components to it, and
Hmm.
some of them weren't working as well as others. So we made some changes, and there was one last detail, and we had a process we had agreed to for how we were going to understand what was and wasn't working with this last detail of this project. And somewhere in between, my boss decided, who was the head of the company, decided to change that constraint of how we were going to test for understanding. And when I walked into my review, in
How long it was, which was well after the end of the project, I'm
which was
assuming.
well after the end, which was well after we ultimately made all the
Oh,
changes
right.
and things were working. When I walked into my review, everything was now working really well.
Yeah.
And when I walked in, though, I received this criticism that I had not made that change fast enough. But I had still made the change significantly faster than what our original agreement was, because our original agreement was to test with consumers. And about a third of the way into that timeline, some constraints changed where we were able to recognize and read the market differently and say, let's
Yeah.
just make this change now.
Yeah.
So
And
I
and that
still
happens all
made,
the time and
right,
on all sorts of projects.
right. So
Yeah.
I still made that change quickly, but it wasn't quick enough. And so in my review, not only was I blindsided, which goes back to leadership versus management, that's a whole different story. You
Right.
should never be blindsided in a review. But not
Right.
only was I blindsided, but what really was going on was being told that that was my error did not leave things. First of all, it was a criticism, not feedback. It
Right.
wasn't a feedback like, hey, this decision should have been made faster. Here's the things we should have had in place instead.
It lacked the second what and the why.
Exactly. It lacked the second what and the why. So if the second what was something like, well, because I did the second what, if the second
Right.
what was, we made an agreement, but when it was obvious we should have changed, but let's be clear, that's exactly what did happen.
Right.
Um, and so and so for me, the importance of that in the world of giving feedback is the ability for people to hear and receive feedback. So I
Yes.
have completely rejected that feedback because
What-
it didn't have
Right.
the what, and why, and it was a criticism. There wasn't a place to affect change,
Yes. It wasn't
right?
good. Yeah, it was not he or she didn't give you good feedback.
Right,
It's good feedback is communication.
right,
They didn't tell you what you wanted. Do they want you to be faster in the
right,
future? Do they want, did
right,
they, like constraints change all the time,
right,
right? And it is our job as leaders in business to decide what change, like which ones we're going to react to and which ones we're not. Because like when when it, when feedback when information comes in about you know hey, I don't like your product, or hey, I had this happen, hey, I got a moldy thing,
right,
right? um you can't always just, you know, uh, change direction based on that, right?
Right.
Because I know that like when we worked together, that was the feedback from a Costco buyer. Like
Yeah.
when we started,
Yeah.
we had this process where we'd show something to buyer, the Southwest buyer or the Bay Area buyer, whatever, and we would take their feedback and then we would make those changes. We'd send it to them, and then we would send if if we hadn't shown it to the next region, we would send that version to the next region, and so
Right.
that it's and then they would come back and then would say, well, no, I wanted it, I want the exact opposite as
As what the
the
other guy. Well,
as the other guy.
and that's when you changed to the King of the Hill model, which we've talked about on this
Yes.
show.
Yeah, where because to address that, it's like, oh, you know what? We're gonna like we have our the trunk of our tree on this product, and there's gonna be branches, right?
Right.
And those branches, we're happy to do as many branches as there are requests, um, until
Till
one
someone places it.
until one clearly is dominant, and then the rest get pruned,
Yeah, until
right?
the money comes in. Show me the
Right.
money. You get what
You
you want.
know, and that was a much more that was a better process because then everybody could, everyone was, got to give feedback to affect change. Um, and also it was everybody got the same thing. They got the same uh, uh, thing to start with, and so we weren't, you know, wandering around as much,
Right.
because
Right.
you don't want to wander around. But as constraints change, business we make different decisions, and so how that happens and is in business is critical.
And yeah, I mean
And
that's so important in the world of that four of our four C's framework because constraints change and then you've got to communicate this. So in my
right,
case, constraints changed that it wasn't communicated with me.
right. Right.
Um,
And then it was
and
like a resultant, like,
and then resulting took
Annie
place.
Duke's,
Yeah.
thinking, and that's like, oh, you're resulting. It's like, oh, you had this worked, right? It doesn't mean you did it well, right?
Right.
This didn't work. It doesn't mean you didn't do it well.
Right. Right.
You got to look at your decision-making process. You
You
don't look at your results.
right. And this was where for me, if you made the best decisions with the information you had,
Right.
and then my favorite word, pivot, but you pivoted as you learned more,
Hmm.
then you're doing that is the best anyone can actually do.
Yes.
Um, and that actually to me is the difference between the brand who do well in the
Yes.
marketplace. And that this is why to me the four C's framework is so important because that is foundational. Like as you and I unpack the four C's, it's all based in the fact that we had such a higher than average success rate. And it
Right.
was like, why we replicated that for 7 years. So why and how? And it was a lot of that ability to pivot, that ability to be able to communicate and build the trust that comes
Yeah.
in the four C's process
Yeah.
that gets so
No,
important. And again, we keep going into these different
and
concepts
right.
and framework because it works.
Right, and the whole feedback thing, like, um, I know that was, our ability to, as a group, not just you and I, but
Yeah,
as the whole company's ability to give and take feedback and act,
yeah,
uh, was a huge piece of it.
yeah,
Um, and that's why we're talking about this now. It's like, hey, this is big,
yeah,
right? One of the things, yeah, like your review is not feedback. Like your annual review is
no,
not feedback. Your annual review is a report.
it's a
You know,
report. And it
feedback is a
shouldn't be,
process, right?
yes, and it shouldn't be, if anything surprises you, then someone's
Yeah,
done it wrong.
yeah,
But going back to this bigger thing, I think whether you're one of the things about the four C's framework, I think that translates to other other industries and other size companies is that there isn't the big difference between how a small company and a big company runs has everything to do with risk and where the risk lives. But the four
Yeah.
C's doesn't have risk. This isn't about risk. So a pivot
But
because a
risk
constraint
is a
has changed,
constraint. Yeah.
but a pivot because a constraint has changed
Yeah.
is about managing to an understanding of the forces within, whatever the project or organization or economics or marketplace.
Right.
But it isn't about, at a small company, a startup or a really small company that's obviously going to be significantly more innovative just because of the nature of being able to take that risk, that same type of pivot driven by a change of a change of constraint, that isn't a change in innovation. That isn't a change in risk. Now, how that plays out in risk is something you have to manage based on what your company's tolerance is. So my point
Yeah.
is that's part of why the four C's can be at a small company or a big company, how you can move through the different sizes of organizations.
Yes. Yeah, the thought process, the tool works the same. Like the answer you
Yeah.
get is different because you
Yeah.
have different constraints. You got different math,
Yeah.
right? And the same thing on feedback. It's like, hey, the feedback is, really important no matter where you are, no matter how big your org is, how or how small. I guess
Yeah.
if there's only one of you,
Yeah.
then you still have to, look for feedback from because you're working with the outside world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so understanding like, hey, like, is this, you know, am I getting a change signal in this communication, right? And do I need to listen to it? Is the receiving part of it, and the giving it is like, how do you be really clear to whoever it is you're talking to,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
because we've all been there. We've all been in that thing where it's like, you know, you had a manager, you had a boss, whatever, and you got a review, or they said something to you, and it's like, and then later it comes back, and it's like, well, you didn't do that, and it's like, I didn't understand, like,
What you
you know,
wanted, that you didn't give me
you
directional,
wanted what? Like,
actionable. Wait, you wanted a change, but you didn't give me something actionable.
yeah.
And
So
yeah,
yeah, that what and why from Starbucks training,
love it.
along with the just understanding the telling people where to go, telling people what to do, uh, generally is better than telling people not to do things, right?
I love that.
Don't run. It's like, no, walk.
Right.
Feel free to
Right.
walk. You
Right.
know,
And so with
again,
that,
my wife.
yeah. And so with that, what are your takeaways for today?
Um, my big one is just clarity on this idea of feedback is communication with the constraint of affecting change.
Yeah,
Uh, because that's something as we started talking about this that kind of bubbled up for me, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a nice tight way of thinking about it, uh, and now and it works within the overall construct. Um, because yeah, then it's like, oh, all right, I want to affect this change. What change do I want to affect? Okay, how do I make that communication work? Like all that, and what sort of agreement do I need to get at the end of the change? Like,
yeah,
and whether that change is what I want, it doesn't matter. The feedback is just like it makes it neutral. So I'm very
yeah.
uh, that language really is my takeaway. It's like, oh, I like that.
I like that because it also can be a tool for
Yes.
asking yourself, okay, what change do I want to affect and how can I be received in a way that can affect that change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think people get lost in in putting together, feedback or what have you, that they
Mhm.
lose sight of that.
Right.
And I think that's a great way. I love that because I think that's a great way to keep
Yeah, it just
that
makes it,
focus.
it's easy it's like a little compass.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and for me
Yeah, what was yours? Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly that. It's the what, and why. Just all of these tools
Hmm.
for being able to affect the change you want, right?
Right.
So, how to help someone manifest their better self. So, giving
Yeah.
them the what, and why, giving them the direction of instead of, you know, don't run, walk, you know,
Hmm.
that mom, I don't know what she could have said other than don't get wet, which, should have been like, get up, back up here and off the
Right.
beach,
Please, please, please stay away from the water.
Yes, yeah, create distance between you and the water. But yeah, I think having a good tool for being able to give effective feedback is a really, really useful useful thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I
No,
love
I
that.
agree. All right.
And cool. And
Well, with that,
yeah.
you've been listening to Thursday Lunch or watching Thursday Lunch, the show about the mechanisms and magic for creating great brands. I'm Dan Howell.
And I'm Stephanie Robbins. If you liked this episode, please tell a friend and don't forget to like and subscribe.
And of course, we would love your feedback, and hear and have you to join in on the conversation. And you can email us at joinus@thursdaylunch.net. Uh, and you can find past episodes and more information about us and the Four Cs at thursdaylunch.net, or on LinkedIn at our Thursday Lunch page.
And you can now find Thursday Lunch on YouTube if you want to see us talking. And of course, we're still on all the other places that you get podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the places. This episode was produced by me, Stephanie Robbins, and Dan Howe, with special thanks to Jen Howe for her amazing support. All stories are true as remembered and affirmed by me and Dan. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved.